name's Naya McKeel. I'm a reporter at Cheddar, the host of the Crypto Craze. I cover fintech and crypto. I've been covering crypto since the beginning. I think I've been to every consensus. And Rumi, you have too, right? Have you been to every consensus?
This is like my fifth or sixth consensus, actually.
Anyway, so I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves before we jump into the conversation.
Great. I'm Monica Desai. Great to see everyone here. I'm in from Kleiner Perkins. Going back further in time, I started my career as a bond trader. So we're definitely looking at a lot of the financial infrastructure pieces of crypto. And then before that, I was at blockchain.
Hi, I'm Matthew Rozak. From the investment side, we're on kind of the investment angle here. Serve as founding partner of Tally Capital, which is my private investment firm. I've been investing in this space since 2012. I've made about 97 investments, so everything from bridges, roads, and tunnels and infrastructure companies to tokenized networks, everything from Mastercoin, if you guys remember those days, to Ethereum, to every Ethereum killer after that. And despite having all these bets, we're still most definitely in the stone ages of crypto and this space. I also serve as co-chairman, co-founder and chairman of Block. We're builders in this space. We build software and infrastructure for companies engaging in tokenized networks, and then also build tokenized networks and applications. So we built Metronome last year. We just launched Veriblock about a month ago. We've got a couple others that are launching this year. And then lastly, and really importantly in this space, also I serve as chairman of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. So a lot of the regulatory dynamics that are afflicting and creating friction in our space. If you believe in this kind of crypto journey, you've got to spend time to educate regulators and kind of get them up the staircase. So that's my background.
And I'm Rumi Morales. I am with Outlier Ventures, where I head their investments. Outlier focuses on very early stage, pre-seed and seed primarily. Open source tokenized networks. Some of you might be familiar with IOTA, Fetch.ai, Sovereign, and some others. We are doing some other additional investments. We just announced today, you might have seen in CoinDesk, that we invested in Agoric. Prior to this, I led the venture arm of the CME Group, where we were the first institution investing in such firms like Ripple, Digital Currency Group, which is why I've always been at Consensus. Even prior to them acquiring CoinDesk, we invested in DCG, as well as Digital Asset and Filament in this blockchain space.
Okay, so venture capital is not necessarily my beat, but I talk to a lot of investors just because fintech and crypto are my beats. And something I hear a lot, just to open a little bit broadly, is that it's not always necessarily the product or the business model that investors are looking at. It's the leadership and the founders, because those other things can be worked on. So I guess let's go down the line, but to what extent do you agree or disagree with that?
I think obviously there's so much happening in crypto, and so for us, we created a thesis to kind of help create some signal in the noise, and that does guide a little bit of what we focus on. But in terms of the gut feeling that you have about an investment, I think so much of it is the rapport that you have with the founder and the team that they're building, the ability for them to recruit and storytell, to get that team and to get other people excited about the product, whatever it is. And then really their ability to kind of break down doors, barriers, because definitely in crypto it's going to be a long road, and you want to be excited about being on that road with them. But it's definitely top of mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's not any secret. Doing a white paper or launching your token or being on CoinMarketCap, that's like step one, maybe step two. But you got to build this stuff. You got to fulfill this piece. And as a lot of projects in the space are realizing, they don't have like a cape on the back, where they know how to raise money, build product, do a go-to-market, enamor, the toughest resource, which is blockchain engineers. All that stuff, that intersection of doing all that is really rare. And so you got to have good people that are running these projects, or have the ability to surround themselves with the right team or advisors or investors to kind of supplant that. But yeah, it is, despite all this awesome tech that inspires us all to be on stage in this room, it's you got to make the bet on the right people.
for Outlier in particular, something that I'm learning, because at CME I was primarily Series A and B investor. Like I mentioned, Outlier does seed and even pre-seed. So sometimes we meet these founding teams, and really the first question I ask is, well, how long have you guys known each other? Have you worked with each other before? But I will say for those young founders out there, or young in terms of your companies are young and you're looking for the investor, you may not have that much money in your pocket yet. Obviously, you're seeking funding. But whatever money you have, try to meet with the investor in person, right? I mean, Zoom calls are great, but I really think in order to establish trust on both sides, it's worth meeting physically, not just having that video call.
Okay, well, let's go from there, Rumi, because we're here on this panel today to talk about that interpersonal relationship with investors before you even send the pitch deck. So, particularly true for seed and pre-seed companies, the ones that are not necessarily connected, and I know it's a very saturated market right now, but how do those companies and those founders get in front of you? Where are you looking?
Heavy flattery helps a lot all the time. Now, I think you'll find increasingly the multi-coin people were just, a gentleman was up here on stage earlier, he mentioned how much they publish. We publish too, so many VCs do. And I think you're able to see kind of not just their thinking and their research, but also their culture and what they respond to. And I think that's always a very useful step, just to have that knowledge already before you even approach somebody. So when you do decide to engage, you can refer to something that they've written that might resonate with you. You can refer to something that they said that you can help out with. If you know that there's a problem that they're seeking a solution for, you can say, I've got this, right? So automatically, it feels more like a partnership. Automatically, it feels more reciprocal, as opposed to you feeling like, oh, how do I demand this person's time, or how do I make this person love me? Think of it immediately from the onset more like a partnership, not a give and take thing.
I'll just add, relationships matter. It's how we're introduced to friends and wives, fiancés. We trust certain people in our tribes and our networks, and that's a big qualifier to spend our attention with people. And I think that's the case generally in tech investing, especially in crypto, where not necessarily other venture firms, because sometimes other venture firms want to sometimes do weird things to promote a particular round, but other CEOs, other technologists that really understand maybe a project or the individual on a deeper level, that's really interesting to me. And I would say, not 90%, but 100% of the stuff that I've done has been generally in that direction. It's been through people I know, like, and trust, and that's a good start. And it's hard because it's like you have to punch through a lot of noise in this space, and every time we go out of a winter and into a spring and summer, it gets noisier and louder, and it's harder to actually kind of puncture that. But finding, if you want to get to an investor or whatever, finding somebody in their network, and we're all kind of connected or one or two phone calls away from each other anyway. I think doing it that way is the best kind of line of sight you could build.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think the only other thing I would add is, in addition to making sure you try to meet in person if you can, is I actually think there's something great about doing it a little bit before you really need to raise the money, so you can build that relationship on a more human level, and then decide when you actually want to do that, whether or not that would be the right fit on both sides, because you're kind of signing up for a 7-year journey or something, and you don't want that to be just based off of like a few meetings, if possible.
Okay, so how do you cut through the noise? I was joking with a couple of you a little bit earlier that it sounds a little bit similar to getting pitches as a reporter, and just establishing that connection beforehand is so helpful because it's so easy to just get lost in all of the emails and the text messages. So, and especially now, we had a little price action over the weekend, and there's a lot of speculation about what this next rally is going to look like. But so how do you filter through all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the thesis has been really critical there. So just where do we think we are in the cycle, and then we're driving towards businesses that are trying to solve the problems that we think are the next wave of problems to be solved, so that then you can enable the next wave. In terms of what Tushar was talking about timing, I think that's exactly what is top of mind with the thesis. And so that's been our driving force. And then from there, we take all the inbound in terms of people or people that you've hit it off with at meetings like Consensus, but that kind of helps narrow it a little bit.
Yeah, and there's like this simplicity of you got to show up. You know, it's like we're at a conference here at Consensus, and there's no shortage of blockchain conferences around the world every single day of every week. But being present and showing up is good. You got to balance that. You got to like build as well. And there's a lot of those instances that you can't. You know, there's that old thing, you cannot plan legendary, right? Like when you have an interaction or a meeting that leads to something amazing. So I started like almost 6 years ago doing these blockchain supper clubs. And out of these dinners, of getting 20, 40, 50 people around a table introducing themselves, that's how I got into some the most amazing relationships and deals and technologists hiring, investing, building relationships out of that. And that's how I met CZ 5.5 years ago. I was his first investor and advisor on the Binance token. And then there's like all these weird things where, and this is like, I feel like it's a little different because crypto just has its own style, because it's like being in venture for a long, long time. The stuff that kind of would make you uncomfortable in a traditional venture sense of like speed and trying to get to a deal faster sometimes, all this accelerated time frames to get into a deal or analyze a deal is kind of, used to be off-putting, now it's kind of weirdly normal. And like, getting into, getting an introduction to somebody on a Friday, having a conversation over the weekend, and then like in the business center of a terrible hotel somewhere in North Carolina, having to fill out a KYC form and wire money that next day. So like 72 hours later, you're in the deal, and it's like, wait, how did that just happen? And now looking back on it, totally normal, But so paying attention, and keeping those developing those relationships in unique ways. And you could do a blockchain supper club in your own city at the next conference. And it's amazing what happens when you invite interesting people, have some good food and have that conversation. It's magic always seems to unfold.
Right. As a participant in a few of Matt's blockchain supper clubs, I can attest to it. That you don't have to like be in that one. I mean, feel free to organically start your own. And it's amazing to what can transpire as a result. I will say though, kind of on the flip side, I recognize not everyone can meet with people all the time. I'm not based in New York. I'm based in Chicago, which is a good city, but it doesn't necessarily have as large of an ecosystem as New York does. So sometimes it can be more creative, though, also about getting your message out there if there are people that you want to reach. I will say, however, many times as a startup, it can be challenging. You feel like you need to send your message out to the community, right? Let's say it's a crypto community. And as Matt mentioned, the crypto community has parts of it have some idiosyncrasies and the culture all to themselves, which might translate just for that community. But be mindful that investors are also watching, right? And you have to think, well, if I want to do like the whole crypto bro thing, because I know that's my crowd, there are some investors that would be completely turned off by that, especially if they might be representing some potential enterprise or institutional clients who'd be like, they don't seem mature enough for me, right? So be always very mindful of how you put yourself out there. Even when you think you're talking to a smaller group of people, investors may see that, and you always want to think, what's the bigger message? What's the maturity level that you as a person want to be able to demonstrate as you're trying to develop your product, and have investors pay attention.
As the industry grows, has it become more difficult to find these authentic moments with founders? Or I guess more difficult to be more creative about that? What has your experience been?
I mean, there's all sorts. There's technical founders that have absolute brilliance, that have trouble communicating or marketing their message well. And sometimes those are unpolished gems, and that takes longer to kind of develop and nurture that or find that. And so that's one. The opposite side of that is it's always good to be clear of what you want. Like, I am raising X on a Y valuation by this date. This is what I do, and just the paragraphs of and you're fighting attention span. And I always tell everybody,
if you wrote your emails in like a form of a tweet, you'd get a higher response rate. And so trying to think of like, and these are complex trillion-dollar layers that we're all building, but on the get-go to get whatever the horse to water, and it's hard. Synthesize your message and your ask as concisely as possible, because then it's like, okay, I get what they need, what they want, who they are really quickly, because there is a competition out there that's profound in terms of attention.
Yeah, it's for someone who's been in this space investing now for 6 years, it's been interesting. I don't want to say that we're getting a little tired or a little jaded, but, and this is not just about crypto, but in general. Sometimes I've been asked, oh, is there a deal that you missed out on that you feel bad because you missed out on it? And I said, actually, I don't think about what I missed out on. I always think, what haven't I seen yet? What have I not seen yet that I want to see? So the same thing with crypto. No doubt some of you walked around this trading, the floor, and it was hard to distinguish some of these booths from the other. And you're wondering, well, what's the difference between that one and that one? Always think if you have a startup out there, this is your difference. This is what you, Mr. Investor, have not seen yet, and I've got it.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally echo that. I mean, I think the one thing that I'm starting to see in terms of those authentic moments is, crypto is still a fairly small community, and so it isn't, you do see a lot of things, but it's really about, the people who you figure out you have some natural connection with, either personally through relationships or through this idea of partnering or information sharing and flow. And so in an authentic way, I think that has proven very powerful, and especially because things are moving so quickly. And if you really start to understand what each other cares about, what's driving each other to be in this space, that can lead to some like organic and positive moments.
Yeah, and I'd also say, form the relationship with the person, not the institution. I mean, you should care about Monica because she's Monica, not because she's Kleiner Perkins, right? And she can move somewhere else. You should care about her and form that relationship with her as the individual.
And it's even more complex in this space because it's like a global phenomenon. So the heat map of my time in terms of things that I look at or invest is more so in Asia and like Eastern Europe than like in the US for a variety of reasons. But I'm also in Asia and I'm meeting with great teams and they're like, we're going to raise this, we're going to build this, and we're going to build an office in San Francisco and do all this. I'm like, why? Just stay here. There's all the resources and your market and a get it factor is off the charts right in your geography. And so it's kind of interesting, the advice and the regulatory dynamics and the market dynamics, depending on the team, you want to give them the best advice you can. And it's not all about going to San Fran and just replicating this community sales office, blah, blah, blah. There's plenty of market for them where they're at.
While you guys are still in that sort of networking stage, what would you say is your responsibility if the networking portion is a two-sided relationship? If you want to hear from those founders and you want to see their pitches, but say it's something that's out of your wheelhouse or it just is better suited to someone else, do you feel any kind of responsibility to, I guess, taking it out of investment? And you hear so much about women and the importance of networking, just the importance of being that sort of mentor, which means something different when you throw the word investor in there. But I guess before you even see that pitch deck, do you feel, what should founders and startups expect from you guys? Is it fair to expect that sometimes you're just not going to respond? What's sort of a realistic bar for them to set for themselves?
I think at a bare minimum, I try to always respond with at least just like initial thoughts, and if it is outside our scope, then that concept. And if there are other people that I think would be better fits for it, I'm happy to send it along, make connections. That's kind of this idea of the information flow and building a real relationship in general with both that entrepreneur and other entrepreneurs, and trying to see within this small ecosystem what you can make of it. The mentor piece is, I view it a little bit separately in that, usually I try to form those relationships as that comes inbound in that kind of bucket, but like as people are asking for that. But I think it's also very important, and that if you meet people in person, you have a better shot at building that connection naturally, and that's really where mentorship takes off anyway. It's rarely being like assigned, But I definitely think there is a baseline responsibility to at least like try to give some feedback if you can, some thoughts, anything.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I was fortunate to meet with Vitalik before Ethereum and Dan Larimar before Block One, and my co-founder is Jeff Garzik, the #3 core developer of Bitcoin. And getting exposure to all these technologists has kind of given me a little bit of a, you know it when you see it kind of a thing sometimes. And so there's a couple of CTO technologists in this space that I view as like our mini Vitaliks. And there was 2 investments I made, not because actually I thought that one was gonna just light up, but I knew this CTO, this technologist, was a company maker. It might not be the first one, but I'm gonna invest in this relationship, get to know him, because I know over the next 2 or 3 iterations, they've got it. And so it's kind of a weird one, and it's hard to actually justify that sometimes, but this is a bit of a road and a journey, and not everything's gonna work out. But there's a very few people that kind of vibrate at that level, and so you gotta like get close to them almost at all costs. So yeah.
Venture, as you know, is a very relationship-driven business, not just with us and entrepreneurs, but us amongst each other as well. And I also feel a responsibility to share good deals and to maintain our relationships. So don't also feel like if you talk to one investor and they'll say, I'm sorry, this is outside of our investment thesis, don't necessarily take that as a complete no. Say, well, do you know, is there anyone in your network for which this might make sense, right? Because we always like to be able to share good deals with each other as well. Outlier has a very unique type of investment thesis. Most things actually don't fit, but I have a very wide network of fellow VCs, right? So that's another way that you can just kind of prod and keep that relationship open. Even if you know someone may not fit with their directly investment thesis, you look at their broader network and say, oh, would you maybe make an introduction to a VC, or let the VC respond in kind that they can do that for you, because it's part of our bread and butter to be nice, to like each other too, right? And to share deals with each other.
And it's also just reminds me of like the responsiveness of VCs and just hearing back from an investor. Yeah, sometimes you get no response, which sucks. Sometimes you get well, once you scale to 100 million, then call us. It's like, okay, thanks. There's 100 people I can call it. Or getting a response, meaning not my cup of tea, thank you. That's awesome for an entrepreneur. I'm not gonna spend time, knocking on a door 100 times. Sometimes you get some benefit where you get a referral, et cetera. That's gold as well, but that's rare.
I think that's all we have time for. And I don't know what your plans are, but I think they'll hang around for a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. But thank you, you guys. And thanks
you.
for everyone for joining.